Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about that whole Asmongold video yet again. So this is I Can Explain Part 2, the double standard. So as you may know, about a month ago or so, I made a video explaining the book that Asmongold reacted to. Well, that whole display of books. I wanted to contextualize the book within a few frameworks: the publishing industry, the romance industry, female entertainment interests, and biological processes within the female brain. However, someone in my comment section pointed out I didn't focus on what Asmongold was more focused on, the double standard. I did touch on the double standard in that video, and I did make suggestions for both men and women. I also noted the problem of immaturity that can hinder the sexes from adequately negotiating or talking about the whole issue. However, as the person who commented noted, I could elucidate on this a bit more. Now, I hate preaching to the crowd and adding to what I feel is already a fairly obvious discussion, but maybe today in my video, I might be able to touch on a few aspects of this whole double standard situation that you might have not considered before, hopefully. Now, some of the foundation of this video is going to be linked to a lot of the other videos that I have created for this channel. So be sure to check out my videos on Ogassen Gadam's A Billion Wicked Thoughts. This will touch on what I've learned about male and female biology. Also, make sure to check out my videos on Jung's anima and animus. Those concepts are more related to male and female psychological individuation or maturity. And this can also have a profound effect on not only how people engage with certain kinds of entertainment, but also how they can talk about these topics. There are other videos on the channel that I will refer to, but I honestly really hate repeating things. So if you want to dig into some of the foundations of this video, feel free to check these videos out. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to offer a disclaimer. When I talk about men or women in this video, I am discussing the average for the most part, unless otherwise noted. There are exceptions to the rule, and there is a spectrum. Male or female behavior will change over time. Changes in male or female behavior may occur over time due to trauma, experience, maturation, or other processes related to personality. Therefore, if you are listening to this and you feel that some of these generalizations don't really fit your experiences or what you currently experience right now, this isn't about you. This is about just average people and their go-to instincts. Now, I will do a short recap of my videos. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. And if you want to get more into the weeds on these very fundamental statements I'm going to make, feel free to watch the videos. First off, males and females process desire in the brain differently. This leads to different forms of entertainment for men and women, generally speaking. Men tend to prefer visual content over textual. Women will enjoy both, but prefer textual, which has led overall to a domination of the publishing market by women, probably since the 1800s, whereas men and male interests tend to dominate the pornography industry. However, the tastes and behaviors of individuals that are often influenced by instincts can be transformed over time. Maturation of males will help them learn how to come to terms with their processes of desire, while maturation within women allows them to stand up for themselves, speak out, and pursue what they want within reason. So, given this general context, why is it that males are being scolded on social media websites and by news media outlets by these so-called journalists for enjoying certain forms of entertainment and women aren't? Well, newsflash, a double standard exists where men's interests in certain adult content or adult entertainment or just sexy characters are under fire for one reason or another. Men are accused of the male gaze, of objectifying women, of upholding unrealistic beauty standards, and of fat shaming. I mean, just look at the essays written about hypersexualization. If you go to any kind of academic research website and you type in hypersexualization, just take a look to see what pops up on autocomplete. It almost always focuses on the sexualization of the female body. In the sub-niche of hypersexualization in video games, the focus is very much on the female body as it is sexualized by male gamers. Now, I did find one article that focused on female gamers and how they interact with the sexualization of females in video games, but most of the articles that pop up first focus exclusively on female bodies in video games and not the representation of male bodies as sexualized. Okay, now I don't doubt that there are ways for you to find articles about male bodies being sexualized within video games or entertainment, but it's not demonized the same way that the hypersexualization of the female body is. As a result, as you can guess, many of these articles tend to portray male gamers negatively and not female gamers. Women, on the other hand, appear to be relatively left alone. Now, I'm going to put some disclaimers on this, but generally speaking, if we're talking about North America and the Western world, women appear to enjoy their adult content without much criticism. Now, there are some areas, some low-key fringe areas, where this criticism does happen. So, for example, female romance books do come under fire. They come under fire from certain specific cultures and faith groups, such as conservative Christians. Also, there are certain cultures, like, for example, Arab cultures, who would be less than welcoming about female romance novels, particularly erotic ones. And beyond these faith groups and culture groups, there is also the academic groups. These academic groups are still fighting over whether romances are actually good for women or not. And in general, whether or not you agree that romances are okay, romances are generally not deemed good literature. Women who enjoy romances are low-key considered less intellectual, and for the most part, they are the whole concept of romance literature as not being really, valuable at all to society is something that most academics hold, particularly those linked to the literary genre crowd. In fact, if we take a look at Myers's book, A Reader's Manifesto, this is something that I recently looked and read aloud on stream. In the introduction, he talks about the reality of the literary fiction world. And this literary fiction world is filled with all of these people who are networked through university and through journalism and through reviewers and through authors. Okay, so you got this whole bunch of people and they're sitting around and they're basically they're crapping on anything that is not literary fiction. They're crapping on what is called genre fiction. So female interests, female entertainment actually does come under fire quite a bit as being essentially lowbrow. We just don't hear it as much because it's basically behind closed doors and it is a topic that is still contested. However, the double standard does exist. For example, if we look at societal behavior, there are these situations where a guy catcalls a girl or hits on a girl, and according to social media and news media outlets and journalists, this isn't terrible. And, everyone is like, oh no, this is so bad, sexism. But if a woman goes out and she gets drunk and she has a good time, she's empowered. Now, once again, I have to make a little disclaimer here because once again, there are fringe people in society, by no means the vocal voice of the media. These fringe people, once again, constitute certain cultures, like, for example, Muslim or Arab culture. They are not encouraging women to go out and do this. They don't consider this empowering at all. And actually, for many women, this kind of behavior is not empowering. It's considered to be rather, well, you're a hoe. We got to remember that within female circles, women look down on women who play too fast and loose. This kind of woman, this kind of hoe, is rarely considered reliable because other women can't trust their men around her. So low-key judging does go on. A lot of women don't actually want to uphold this fake standard of it's okay to go out and behave like a hoe at night. So I do need to put in here that once again, there is a double standard where the media and academia, who have very loud voices on social media, these people appear to be upholding this double standard, criticizing guys, but calling girls empowered for going out and having a fun night on the town. That does exist, but on an everyday level, most women do not appreciate women who go out and behave like that. And they don't appreciate that kind of stereotype of female behavior being perpetuated by somebody. Overall, let's just say that there is, generally speaking, a double standard in the Western world where when men see something that they like, they will show their appreciation to a woman, whether it is in a crass way or not, and that's considered to be just terrible and sexist. But if a woman basically behaves the same way, she's empowered, she's a girl boss, she's taking control of her life, agency, etc., etc. But the reality is that in some ways, what women do to men as part of their process of desire is kind of creepy if you think about it, because when men see a female body, they just see the body, they go home, they work it off, right? They spend some time with some lotion and it's, done. They might think about that woman obsessively for a time period, but the woman is essentially a body. A woman, on the other hand, because of the way she processes her desire, she will actually imprint on the male she desires all kinds of things. She's going to create his psychology. She's going to imagine getting married to him. She's going to imagine him saying things to her that he would probably never say IRL. It's very, very odd that no one's talking about this. And that is why a double standard exists. How did this double standard actually happen? Well, there's a whole layer of issues that have led to this situation. And I'm going to start with some basics, and then I will move into some historical situations surrounding religion and feminism before I land on the big problem that is fueling this current behavior, particularly by news media and academia. All right, so my first point I'd like to make is that, generally speaking, the way porn for women or literary porn for women is handled appears to be less physical than men, giving the appearance of being more respectful of the individuals involved. So this gives women this false sense of superiority because how her porn is created or how it is experienced has the appearance of being less physical and less intrusive. In many ways, women process desire. In many ways, how a woman processes desire involves the entirety of the man, his psychology, his personhood, his physical attributes, as well as his work and his money and everything else. And so it's just not simply a physical input response. It's not, I see broad shoulders, I horny, right? It's not, I see bubble butt, I horny. There's usually a huge complex range of things that a woman thinks through before she feels desire, unless she's drunk. That's one way to get a woman quickly through those doors. But generally speaking, aside from being drunk, A woman usually has to think a lot before she gets to a position where she's ready to, get physical. And this involves her essentially imprinting on or exploring the man. And this is really contrasted by how a male experiences desire. A male sees a body part, or he sees a woman that he loves. He sees a literal physical cue or trigger, and it just goes zippity zoo right down. And there's going to be some kind of response physically. And of course, this can be mitigated by maturation. This can be mitigated by experience. This can be mitigated by love, by upbringing, by education. But generally speaking, if we're talking about like left alone in the wild, talking about biology here, the way that a man is triggered by desire has less attachment. And so women can often get this weird notion that how they are processing desire, how they are experiencing desire, is more respectful and holistic in terms of seeing the person. Okay. So they think, oh, I'm not just seeing his body. I'm not just seeing this or that. I'm seeing all the parts of him that make him a person. Whereas a guy just sees a pair of boobs or a hips or something. I hate to break it to the ladies, but this is a lie. Number one, a lot of you just imprint on the guy. You actually haven't talked to him all that much. You don't actually see him as a person. You see him as a caricature of a person, and you're making that person up. Hence why a lot of women get disappointed by reality after they get to know that guy after some time. And another thing is that I still think it's kind of creepy. Honestly, I still don't think it's respectful to have these long and involved obsessive thoughts about a person that is essentially you having a whole life with them or whatever, without their consent. Honestly, it's a little intrusive in some ways, but because men tend to be more outgoing about their desires, they tend to act on their interests. Men tend to be a bit more aggressive about how they pursue things, generally speaking. When a man sees something that he likes and he comments on it, and if that is literally based only on the physical, to a lot of women from the sidelines who don't understand the biology of how the male brain is working, they will take umbrage because they will feel that this isn't respectful. It's reducing them down to a body part. And this is how the double standard first began. I think on a biological level is a lot of men and women don't know how to talk about how they are processing desire. And as a result, men come off looking worse than women. And to make matters worse, okay, we're going to get to the second point, is faith. Okay, particularly the Christian faith. So I can't go into this in detail, but basically in religious circles in North America, particularly Christian circles, there is a huge ongoing discussion about what is purity, what is immorality, etc., etc. And purity culture had arisen from the 80s and into the 90s, early 2000s, where women had to carry a large burden of the purity culture by dressing appropriately. So it usually surrounded concepts of modesty. However, what a lot of these people talking about the situation don't talk about, which I did notice growing up, is that when it came to sermonizing, when it came to a pastor getting up behind a pulpit and preaching about sexual immorality, who do you think was the target of those sermons? Not the women. It was the men. Men were the target of most sermons discussing sexual immorality. So women's clean romance books, okay? So there's a whole industry of Christian romance books out there that are incredibly clean. Sex doesn't happen in the books, maybe not even kissing. Sex is saved until marriage. So these clean romances, which have actually created a whole publishing industry, like there's this whole sub-genre for that. That was never discussed in those sermons. Only recently, in more modern, more open books that are more willing to tackle female sexuality, only those have talked about those kinds of books. In short, in the religious foundations of North American society, there may be a lingering notion that women are pure by simple virtue, that they are able to enjoy desire without the presence of sex. Now, you could argue that this notion is misogynistic at its base level, because it's suggesting that women shouldn't be able to claim sexual desire openly. But I would argue that we don't need to talk about misogyny within this debate if we don't want to. We could just argue that, women also, particularly within these religious circles, pursued this kind of an approach to female sexuality as a way to protect themselves from very real biological factors like pregnancy, for example, because pregnancy is a big deal. So basically, whether it's because of misogyny, whether it's because of, very real biological factors that women have to take into account, you can argue about that in the comments. I don't really care. But what I do want to theorize is that regardless of the foundation of where this came from, women, generally speaking, up until recently, in religious circles, have enjoyed a degree of protection from sermonizing on sexual immorality and taking part in pornography or reading romances. Okay? And this Christian culture, with its odd dichotomy of how it handles male and female desire, may have seeped into the general cultural perception of North America as a whole. And it lingers to this day. And we know this lingers because there are some people who argue that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture affected second wave feminism. So let's get into that now. So number 3, feminism. So feminist ideology has been talking about female desire for a long time. And they've been asking questions like, should women be involved in porn? Are sex workers feminist for empowering themselves through sex? Or are they victims of the male gaze? So on and so on and so on. So feminist circles actually have been split for some time now. Second wave feminism was negative about porn and all of that. There was a feeling that porn devalued the human body. Women weren't encouraged to get involved in sex work. And Camille Paglia's book, which I own, called Free Women, Free Men, Sex, Gender, Feminism, touches on this at various points. So in her introduction, after talking about major sex symbols of the 60s, she writes, "But the early hostility of second wave feminism to the great sex symbols of films, indeed to all blatant eroticism in the entertainment industry, prevented those spectacular images from being incorporated into the history of women's modern advance." She then links this issue of removing sex from the table to major feminist activists and figures, such as Betty Friedan and Germaine Greer, who, according to her, failed to keep their risk-taking libidinous personas alive, a commentary she links later to other feminist figures she hates. We'll talk about that in a few seconds. In her first article in the book, an excerpt from her larger work, Sexual Persona, she wrote, "Sexuality and eroticism are the intricate intersection of nature and culture. Feminists grossly oversimplify the problem of sex when they reduce it to a matter of social convention, readjust society, eliminate sexual inequality, purify sex roles, and happiness and harmony will reign." Now, the rest of this section is dedicated to her elucidating on her stance about sex and desire and eroticism, how they are fundamental forces of nature that often elicits cultural intervention, not always good. On page 25, she talks about how sexual necessity can't be eradicated by culture entirely, and we have to come to accept certain realities. Feminists need to understand that not everything that men and women do can be broken down into moral standpoints or social justice talking points. Now, in Article 10, basically an article she wrote for Playboy, on page 84, she wrote, "Because I'm a pornographer, I am at war with Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin. These obsessed, moralistic women, feminism's oddest couples, were co-authors of the Minneapolis and Indianapolis ordinances against pornography that were declared unconstitutional." On page 87, she notes, "Their alliance with the reactionary anti-porn far right is no coincidence." She then links McKinnon to WASP ideas and a religious background that is incidentally Republican. And this is complemented by Dworkin, who is more bizarre sounding. But basically, Dworkin seems to be like one of those hysterical women who see like assault everywhere, which Paglia calls the girl with the eternal cold syndrome on page 88. On page 89, she goes on to say, "They detest pornography because it symbolizes everything they don't understand and can't control about their own bodies. Current feminism, with its anti-science and social constructionist bias, never thinks about nature. Hence, it cannot deal with sex, which begins in the body and is energized by instinctual drives. McKinnon and Dworkin's basic error is in identifying pornography with society, which they then simplistically define as patriarchal and oppressive. In fact, pornography, which erupts into the open in periods of personal freedom, shows the dark truth about nature concealed by the artifices of civilization. It's about lust, our animal reality that will never be fully tamed by love." Now, you may agree or disagree with Camille Paglia's take on this, but I do think she has a point here with second wave feminism being part of this almost religious ideas about the female body and sex and the male body and sex, wherein pursuing sexual desire was basically seen as bad and part of the problem. Now, what happened after? What happened after the 80s and the 90s? Well, obviously, we went into a whole period where people started coming out of the closet and there was more freedoms. And third wave feminism at first appeared to be more sex positive. So they were all about finding your sexuality and your body and your power. And there were people who were promoting all kinds of ways for women to explore their sexuality. And this is, I think, where the whole female is empowered by going out for a night on the town came from. But you will be very surprised to know that actually more prudish ideas about porn are returning. Now, does that correlate to female porn in the romance book? Well, well, no. So it's very interesting. So while male interactions with sexual content we're now seeing is being labeled or being perceived as fundamentally problematic, female interaction is still contested when it comes to how females interact with sexual content or content that elicits desire. So in summary, while feminism has vacillated about whether porn is good or bad, throughout the entire ordeal, how women enjoy certain things has also been contested, but romances, generally speaking, didn't come under as much fire as porn did or video game sexualization did. Okay, so if you do take a look at commentaries on romances, most feminists have had some critiques about these romance books, but they didn't necessarily see the books as part of the problem, and they still like to pose women, while these women were enjoying these books, as being, still very much oppressed by some kind of institutional patriarchy. Even though these women are going out and buying a gajillion Harlequin, no, it's still, they're still very much, disenfranchised, and they have no power, and this is them, taking back their power, etc., etc. On the other hand, there are some feminists who do see romance as being problematic because romance is seen as perpetuating standards, because most romances, in order to be effective and to sell well, actually have more traditional male-female dynamics. The man has to be strong, and the woman, although very strong and independent, needs to need the man. So romance books have always been a bit contested, but porn was contested, then it wasn't contested, and now it's being contested again. And video games are now being lumped in with porn, the whole talk about this. And now when a guy is enjoying some sexy girl on screen, it's suddenly like, oh my god, he's perpetuating this, blah, blah, blah. So why is that happening? Is it feminism? Actually, I would argue no, because as we can see, feminists don't know. They're still, the jury is out in terms of the feminist standpoint. But what is much more clear is the cultural Marxist standpoint. So now we're going to get into cultural Marxism and identity politics, because I think this is where things are really not great. Okay, so here's some facts about cultural Marxist and identity politic ideology. Let's take a look at this ideology. Okay, so the idea is that men, having been oppressors for so long, are fundamentally complicated in acts of oppression, so their enjoyment is just the male gaze, and it will tend to objectification and a host of other negative things. And since men are bad, particularly white men, things that these men enjoy are also bad. Therefore, any act of interacting with entertainment may easily become intertwined with oppressive, institutionalized ideas about women, etc., 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 and lead to sexism and misogyny and victimization and all these other bad, terrible social crimes. Now, why? Why would... how did cultural Marxism even get to this point? Well, the reality is that cultural Marxism began with a lot of different thinkers, but one of the big thinkers that I studied in my university class was a guy called Walter Benjamin. He was a German Jew philosopher and literary kind of analyst, art critique person. Anyway, he argued that art can only find redemption or find meaning through propaganda. And my professor basically suggested that since words have power, everything that happens in these fantasy worlds, in these forms of entertainment, will bleed over into the real world. They will have real world impact. And since all creative work is informed consciously or subconsciously by a writer's beliefs, everything is therefore propaganda of that from that writer, more or less. And therefore, art is no longer simply an experience, but an instructional tool for one way of life or another. Now, this is where we get those weird quotes from like Anita Sarkeesian and all of those people who are like, this, the patriarchy and sexism and everything, misogyny is everywhere, and we have to point it all out. So the idea is that all authors will put themselves into their work. This will cause fundamentally some form of bias or propaganda within their work. And this bias or propaganda will perpetuate either good things that they deem to be good or bad things that they deem to be bad. Now, I don't think this concept is entirely wrong. I do think creatives influence their work. And that's often, an inevitable part of creating something. And I also do think that if you give words power, they will have power. And there is ways in which people can use their words to socially shame people and to correct behavior. But I think that if you are, I don't know, mentally, emotionally, psychologically mature, if you've been raised to be resilient, I think you can actually contest some of this. I don't think that this is just a causal if-then. This whole situation is contestable. So if you have resilience, if you are mature, I think you can enjoy various forms of entertainment without crossing the streams. And these mature individuals know the difference between accepting something and reading something. They can read something without accepting it as reality. These, mature individuals see art as an exploration, as a romp, as a fantasy, as something temporary, and not a determination of their values or future actions. And I touch on this a little bit in my previous part 1 video, where I was talking about how women are having to hide their very real biological desires because they're afraid, basically, that their very real biological desires for more traditional dynamics between male and female will somehow invalidate their desire to own a house and have property and be independent and vote. It's just like, what? What? So anyway, the idea that people's behavior IRL, or their ideas or their expectations, can be formed by their entertainment, while true, isn't necessarily always true. Yes, if you are very impressionable, if you don't have a mind of your own, if you're in a stress state, if you are stupid, you could definitely take something in and be like, oh, is this real? But if you have your head screwed on straight, I think you can take risks with your entertainment and just enjoy some fantasy, and it needn't determine what's true IRL. So anyway, these people, now that you know all of this, these people believe that men are bad, right? They believe that there is some kind of patriarchy or institutionalized misogyny perpetuating oppression, and this is seen with the male gaze. And so then any kind of media that a man enjoys that involves a beautiful woman, and that may result in that man, let's say, pursuing some kind of sexual behavior, let's say masturbation or something. This then becomes problematic because this material is perpetuating the male gaze and therefore perpetuating this would-be system of oppression that is going on. Females, on the other hand, being seen as institutionally oppressed, are therefore able to pursue their desire, even if their desire is a bit, I don't know, creepy. And they basically can pursue their desire without being censored, because they are institutionally and historically oppressed. Now, of course, there's an intersection of factors that can make some females more oppressed than other females. But in general, the idea is that females in general can enjoy their romance books or their visual novels or their mobile games about hot men banging hot girls just fine, because they aren't the problem. Men are the problem. And that's why the double standard exists. And you can put your head in the sand and pretend, oh, this is just an academic problem in the universities. But I hate to break it to you, this group of ideas, the cultural Marxism idea, the identity politics idea, intersectionalism, all of this is at play today in academia. And I know this is hard to believe, but this ideology has been going on for the past 10 to 15 years, maybe longer. Walter Benjamin, I think, was writing in like the 1940s, I think, like the early 1900s. So it's been going on for some time. And I've had front row seats to this clown show. And I can tell you that the people going into tech, into the tech industry, into education, the people who are going into the entertainment, industry, all of these young writers and directors and teachers and journalists and game developers, all of them are being inculcated with this stupid idea that men and women can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And fantasy will bleed into reality. And reality will affect how fantasies are made. And the reality is that men are being this oppressive force of oppression. And so anything that they might enjoy on a biological level is complicated intrinsically by the oppression of the male gaze and all of that. And these people who believe that this reality exists continue to perpetuate this double standard. And incidentally, they also tend to go out and they also start ruining things for women. So as I mentioned in my previous video, go check it out. The sound is terrible. But there are spaces where even female entertainment, like my mobile game that I used to play, Love Nikki, or some romance, people are coming out and saying, oh, we should have more consent and we gotta have more modern men, etc., air quote modern men. All of these kinds of things are showing how there are these women who are coming out and telling ordinary women, you can't enjoy the fantasy of having a sexy girl and dressing her up really pretty. You can't have a fantasy of a strong man sweeping you off your feet onto a horse. Okay? So there are actually women who are going after other women for enjoying what normal, ordinary women want to enjoy. Okay? And it's all happening behind closed doors. It's happening within female circles. It's happening within female spaces that male gamers don't know about. But it is happening. The difference, though, is that while there's infighting within female circles about what constitutes sexualization, what constitutes oppression, blah, 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 when it comes to the news media and the outlets and the journalists and the educators and all of these very loud voices online, almost all of them are directing their censure at men. And this is why the double standard is very much real. Although, like I said, there are these side things to consider in terms of the female space. That being said, I don't want us to walk away from this whole situation entirely black-pilled. I mean, let's be real here, okay? This group of people don't define the majority yet. That's the key, okay? So first off, this whole issue with intersectionalism and identity politics and cultural Marxism and messed up feminism and this kind of like lingering Christian purity culture, okay? All of this appears to be, for the most part, a North American problem. And maybe some European countries, let's say in the West, Western Europe, may also have these issues. However, there are swaths of the world, okay? And there are large portions of these continents that don't adhere to this nonsense, and they don't even know what's really going on. They're just trekking along. They're just trying to enjoy, life. They just want to have fun, right? And so the SMS and the news media aren't actually really representing the majority. It's actually a very loud minority who've gotten hold of a microphone and they're screaming into the void. and people are paying attention to what they're saying, unfortunately. But the good news is we don't need to really freak out. Like the employee at Barnes & Noble who put up a bookshelf that doesn't represent general female interests. That bookshelf doesn't. Most women aren't reading about a woman having sex with Mothman. That's not normal. That's a niche of a niche. So we got to contextualize all of this situation with a larger framework of reality. And that is to say that the news networks and SMS don't represent what most ordinary people are thinking. So then you might be wondering, why aren't these people standing up and telling, this loud minority to shut up? Well, I think most humans are social animals who follow each other in groups. So as a result, I think quite a few women, particularly, or men sometimes, who appear to tout this double standard might not actually believe it. They're just going along so they don't get ostracized. There's probably a portion of them who don't even understand what they're saying. Unfortunately, they're just parroting words. They don't really understand what is going on. They are just saying things, and this is just a fact, unfortunately. I've seen it happen at university. But even more interesting and fascinating, and this is true of even the weirdest kind of romance novels out there, even if you've drunk the Kool-Aid, As I noted in my first video, nature cannot be denied. Time and experience can cure some of this intellectual malady in individuals who are genuinely seeking to grow, to find the truth. Between nature and interaction with commonsensical folks, many of these people do come around. Or if they don't come around, they at least, quiet down. But yeah, I do think that there is a double standard, and it's really unfortunate because I don't want people to come into my space and tell me what I can and cannot enjoy. Get out of here, honestly. And I would also have to say that I don't want to see guys in my circles having their video games, gutted because, Lord forbid, they see some boobies. Just leave them alone. As long as the guys understand that this isn't reality, then they're fine. Yeah, go have fun. So anyway, between my two videos, to sum it up, I think you have an idea of what's going on here, hopefully. We've been talking about the state of romance, the state of the romance novel industry. We now understand that the display that Asmongold was reacting to actually doesn't represent general female interest at all. You can see that this all points to a double standard in society, particularly when it comes to news media and social media, where women are largely free to pursue their desires, enjoy their entertainment, their porn, their reality TV shows, whereas men are scolded and shamed. As I hopefully have proven to you, this problem has been percolating a long time, and it needs to be nipped in the bud. Double standards like this show that the feminism of today isn't about making women equal with men. It's about crushing men, punishing men, and making men women. And what are men being punished for? Biology, for the most part, honestly, which is just insanity to me. How did we get here? Because you can bet your bottom dollar that once they've done fixing men, air quote, fixing men, they're going to come for the women and their romance novels too. And we're seeing that, like I said, today, where there is this new form, I don't know if it's third wave or fourth wave, who knows, this new form of feminism that, Lord forbid, you pursue desire on any kind of level. And yeah, this has been a very interesting exploration. I want to say thank you to everyone who commented on my video. It gave me a lot of food for thought, and it really also helped me to realize that, yeah, Asmongold was making a point that I could have addressed more clearly. So this is my hopefully much more clear and obvious summary of this double standard situation that is going on. And ultimately, I think a lot of this could be fixed by people being honest with each other and with themselves, and people not being afraid of having a bit of fun and, enjoying a bit of fantasy. It's we don't need to cross the streams and we need to really push back against these weird ideologies that are demonizing one half of our population, honestly. So anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it today. I wish everyone a very happy week, and I will see you all next time.